more than I deserve, especially since I left all my pussy and crack poems at home. And,
he got him.
maybe I could change a few words, move in that direction. In fact, the first poem I plan to read is a vegan poem. And this is for all my vegan friends, wherever they are around the world. It's called Hot House Brunch. We were served houseplants in thick-rimmed clay pots with a rich black soil and a gravelly topping. Rosa was unhappy with her violets and eyed Olden's succulent jade with agitation and longing. So they traded pots. Everyone caressed their leaves and stems and petals to death with their sighs. And later we retired to the patio for a couple of spliffs. A chained-up backyard dog barked in the distance as Rosa began to stroke Alden's sapling limbs with her furtive glances. And the rest of us found ourselves chaffing one another over whether Venus flytraps belonged on the menu or starring in vegan porn snuff films. And laughed so hard, we all of us began to drool. I wrote that poem because one day I was thinking about the fact, do vegans drool? Oh, right, vegans drool? Why not? Oh, okay, well, I just thought that was what people did when they got close to meat. Like you see dogs, you know. All right, okay, I'm not anti-vegan. Just didn't bring my pussy and crack poems. What am I going to do? The next poem is for those of you people, like myself, who probably spend a little bit too much time watching TV. Anyhow, it's called Stay Tuned. Imagine under the new dispensation, you live forever. You never die. And everybody else lives forever too. They never die either. So one afternoon you are watching TV and the announcer says, "Stay tuned for part 2 in 90 years." You look down at your eternity wristwatch and say to yourself, well, I've got a little time. So you go into the kitchen and you make a cup of coffee, and then another cup of coffee. You step outside into the sunshine, and you walk around the block and decide, what the hell, maybe I'll go to law school. So you go to law school, and you graduate, and you start practicing law for about 40 years. That gets boring with never any murder cases in the offing, because nobody ever dies. So you figure, what the hell, maybe I should give medical school a shot. So you go to medical school, and you graduate, and you practice everything from obstetrics to geriatrics for like about 40 years. But that gets boring because nobody ever croaks. So what's the point? Where's the heroics? Where's the emergency room adrenaline rush? So now you've got like about 10 years left. 10 long years. But you can't think of anything else to do. Time drags on. You try your hand at writing novels and poetry and plays and such. But your efforts never really pay off, do all that well, because nobody ever takes seriously stuff composed by people who are still alive. Dead authors are better. The true immortal. The lucky bastard. Think about that. So, you try to commit suicide like Sylvia Plath, or Ernest Hemingway, or Virginia Woolf, or Thomas Chatterton, if you've ever heard of him. I don't think so. But like, it doesn't work. You never die. You knew that anyway. It's the gesture that counts. But failed stabs at literary stardom generate desperate appetites. You start indulging in drugs. After all, you're not going to die, okay? And you are buzzed and high and tripping for, excuse me, you're buzzed and high and tripping, and after what seems a lifetime, you crash, and only a couple years have gone by, okay? Your ass is dragging, and you look like shit, of course, and all your friends have abandoned you. You're really, really beat by now. And you've still got, what, 8 years to go. You decide the only way to make time pass fast is to kick back and relax and recuperate. Even after the profligacy of your addictions, you still have money left over from your law and medical practices. But you are all alone. You book a luxury cruise and sail around the world 36 times. That's 36 Kagoshima port calls and 36 interminable kabuki performances and 36 visits to both ground zeros. You even tour the Ganges and then the Himalayas and make it to the summit of Mount Everest, which takes a hell of a long time, with only 3 Sherpas tugging the SS Old Fart up the slopes. Finally, you arrive back home just as part 2 is starting. It's great, worth the wait. Then part 2 is over and part 3 begins in 90 years. This time you decide to just settle in and let the commercials roll. You've done it all, and there's nothing like killing time. Really, there isn't. Nothing like it at all. The best revenge. Imagine that. Okay. That's my audience pleaser right there. Probably released it too early. At any rate, this next poem was kind of inspired by 2 events. The first one, have you ever been to the Ulsan Aquarium? Have you had a chance to go there? They charge an arm and a leg, I know, to get in. But they've got this one display, in the aquarium that just fascinated me. Because as I looked at certain fish, I saw that they were actually a fish that I was kind of familiar with in just our general TV knowledge of fish. Anyhow, it's called floaters. Just called floaters. What the hell? Okay. Had my eyes examined last week. Turns out I have these things called floaters. Lacy black lingerie-like skeins and webs that slide blithely across my field of vision as if I were underwater. Sometimes it's like living inside an aquarium surrounded by leafy dragonfish, those seahorses in drag. But these floaters have no means of locomotion, yet locomotion they have. They always go from left to right, or down from up, or up from down, whatever the hell. And then the next moment, it's exactly the reverse. My doctor tells me they are just the flotsam and jetsam of old, worn-out tissue detached from the wall inside my eyeball, and I should ignore any irregularities in their behavior. They have no purpose, no designer, no intention, no destiny. They are just there and crap I have to put up with because I am old. They are there when I get up in the morning, and they are there when I go to bed at night. They are particularly active in their aimlessness when I stare at a sunny blue sky. That kind of weather gets them particularly riled. Okay. I say particularly because that's what they are, if nothing else. Particles. They refuse to assume the shape of anything I am intimately familiar with, except lacy black underwear. Lingerie. It's another slick way. Lingerie, like I said, no purpose, no designer, no intention, no destiny. But perhaps it's all of a forbidden world one can hope to fathom this side of the veil. Shameless, inscrutable, and serene. These seahorses in drag. If you ever get to the, if you ever get to any aquarium and you have a chance to look at the leafy dragon fish, go there. They barely move, and they sit in a very camouflaged sort of part of.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
You know.
They're awesome.
They're awesome.
Yeah, they feel like within the seaweed. They just are
exactly
so beautiful.
And then when you look really, really close, they're just fucking seahorses.
I see them when I'm scuba diving. I mean,
oh, you do?
One of the most fantastic things to see.
Yeah, they're really cool.
You can't see them.
They're really cool. But you have to look hard. You have to look really hard. And what you realize is that they're like seahorses with really, really fancy clothes.
That plants were growing off of them.
Exactly, yeah, that's what it looks like. Okay,
Let's go right.
see, I'm right. If the bartender says I'm right, I'm right. Ready to go. At any rate, a few poems about Korea. This first poem was inspired, it's short. It was inspired by an actual event when I walked into a classroom one morning before class some years ago, and had kind of, I saw an image which stayed with me for many, many years, and then just recently appeared in a poem of mine. The poem, excuse me, is called Per Speculum et in Enigmate. Okay, that's just fancy Bible Latin for through a glass darkly. Sometime during the windy night, the pigeon either flew or was blown into the filmy, unwashed pane of the 14th floor classroom window and left a splayed and stunned impression of sudden death on the wing in a morning sun that revealed how shit happens to the least of things, just that moment you least expect it, as my students glide in with their notebooks and pens, inquisitive eyes, insouciant smiles, and preening in tiny mirrors their immaculate and buoyant plumage. Think about the young gals with hair and the poor pigeons smacking into shit. Like windows. Which fortunately were dirty, and therefore, when the pigeon hit it, it left an impression. I saw it, and years later, wrote a fucking poem. Amazing. Okay, that's my girl students. They're the ones that I would watch comb their hair, in the moments before class started. A poem that was inspired by some of my male students, especially the senior students I had at the university, who had all gone through, most of them had gone through their military service, and they had come back with tales about it. Never very, very interesting tales. It's a pretty boring life. But some good observations about their gripes about military life, which I realized were kind of universal gripes. All grunts complain about the fucking food. Okay. And this is, begins with, I guess what you call an image that the Korean soldiers came up with about their food. Anyways, it's called Consolation. Consolation, South Korea. A chicken walked through it with boots on. My male soon-to-graduate students recall in their jocular reminiscences of mess hall banter, the watery and tasteless broth they were ladled for the 2 years of conscription they served as ROK field grunts, which well may help to explain the near ubiquity of cheap fried chicken shops, chicken joints on this peninsula, with salaries stagnant and all the plum jobs going to the grads of the elite schools. No matter how bad off you are today in your desperate search for work, there is just almost about enough money in your pocket to feed an army. I'll go back to the first line of that poem because I don't think it's... A chicken walked through it with boots on. These guys are talking about their chicken soup, okay, in the army. And they go, yeah, there's some chicken in it. A chicken walked through it with boots on. That's poetry. Really. When I heard that, I never forgot. It was probably 20 years ago, 25 years ago. I heard about that from the guys, and absolutely perfect. Okay.
Well, where you come from, man? Your bio wasn't so good from Sean.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Where do I come from? You know, some people say hell.
I said, I thought
Some people say
Chicago, but he
northeastern
told me
Ohio.
Cleveland. Cleveland?
Cleveland.
Yeah.
You know? You can tell.
I can tell your accent, man.
No shit. What do I sound like?
You sound like a good motherfucker that says it like it is.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't even have any pussy or back.
Say that, Paul.
Next time.
Don't improvise like
It's just like it is.
I remember when I went to college in the South, and they mocked my accent. So it's cocksucker. Fuck Coach Penn. So I still root for those assholes. Great. Yeah, now you really threw me off my game here. It's revealed that not only do I come from Cleveland, Ohio, but I sound like it. I thought I had lost that a long time ago. Okay. Where are you from?
Some people think you don't lose. I come from Watertown, South Dakota.
Mhm. So how do you know what people from Cleveland sound like?
I went to school with some of those guys.
Is this a poem?
People from Cleveland come in here all the time? Okay, yeah.
I just know I like you, Bob. I know I like the way you sound.
Okay, definitely.
The guys that I like sound like you. Alright?
Well, unfortunately, I'm probably going to have to disappoint you with this next poem. What the hell? This next poem.
I loved every one you said so far. So
Okay.
I know
Say that, Paul. Say that, Paul.
This next poem, first of all, it's about an event that actually took place many, many years ago, which I was basically attended. And so it's a long, long time ago, decades ago, but I wrote it only recently. It just rose up from somewhere, and I just had it there. It was right in front of me. I just had to write it down. At any rate, It's a little bit long and contains a couple names that you might probably don't know. The first name is a guy named Andrei Vosnesinsky, who was a Russian poet, popular and kind of controversial way back when the Soviet Union was falling apart, dissolving. The other name in the poem is probably more familiar to you. You all know Allen Ginsberg? Everybody knows Allen Ginsberg. He wrote Howl and Sunflower Sutra and a whole bunch of other poems. What you may not know is that when Ginsberg came to poetry readings to read, he often brought this strange musical instrument with him. It was called a harmonium. And it's just looks like a wooden, from a distance, it looks like a wooden box. And it operates kind of on the same principle of an accordion. You got to kind of pump it, and it makes some sounds. I never got up to examine one, but I figures in this poem towards the end. Okay. The other comment I want to make before I read the poem is that it's about a conference, a poetry conference, God forbid, that took place over a couple days. And the poem begins on the second day, and then the poem moves a little bit to a newspaper article written earlier, and then to the first day of the conference. So it's kind of in reverse order. And its title kind of reflects a poem by Robert Browning, but what the hell, that's not important. At any rate, it's called My First and Last Countess. At the World Congress of Poets, Seoul, South Korea, 1990. For Paula Lucarini Poggi. I kissed the hand of a countess once at a poetry celebration in Seoul, when Andrei Vosnesinsky recited that Pablo Neruda poem about socks. As we sat at the round banquet tables, and she stared at me over the floral centerpiece all evening long until the food and poetry were over, and a dapper gentleman in a blazer who could have just stepped out of an Esquire spread or a Browning monologue led the 48-ish Contessa up to me and explained that she did not speak English, but swore that mine was the very face of her dear dead papa. And so was why she couldn't take her eyes off of me. And she hoped she had not been rude or made me otherwise uncomfortable. As in that instant, she lifted her hand ever so slightly, and I took it in my own and lifted it ever so slightly to my lips, as if I had done it 1,000 times on such occasions, and kissed it dryly, just a touch really, like you see in the movies of Anna Karenina or Gatherings at Bath in Jane Austen's Persuasion. And she smiled, pleased as punch, and withdrew with her companion, as I myself withdrew to a lift, elevator, where I bumped into a dour Allen Ginsberg, who had been slammed in the Korean newspapers after visiting political dissidents in jail upon his arrival on the peninsula, before shaking hands with those dignitaries who had invited him in the first place. And so, an insult, if you know anything about Asia. And said, graceless, ingrate guest and so-called beatnik poet had furthermore been informed by a critic of some stature in the nation's literary circles via a simultaneous interpreter, okay, at a symposium on the day before the banquet gala, that the author of Howl and Sunflower Sutra knew not squat about the East, nor jack of true Buddhahood. And we all looked down at our feet and fiddled with our headphones and waited for it to be over and done with. When A.G. Ginsberg lifted up his harmonium and played something god-awful ugly or god-awfully transcendental, depending upon your religion, okay, Taoist, Maoist, Nirvanist, Confucian. As somewhere in the auditorium, a countess who had seen better days and wouldn't meet me till the next one for that docile lifting to the lips, sat staring at a stranger wearing the face of a father she'd adored. That's the poem. True story. The end I don't know, because I was just sitting there and she was somewhere in the auditorium. She told me the next day I looked like an old man. Or rather, the guy did. I don't know what he was. He was the count or a gigolo or what. You never know. Okay. How am I doing? I got
Doing
any
good.
time?
No, you're good. Okay.
You get all the time you want, Bob.
Okay. This next poem is a short one, and it's about the fact that I've been in Korea for a really, really long time, but I haven't lost, the fact that I come from Cleveland, as the bartender revealed. I should have spoken to him earlier when I came in. No, man, I'm from New York City. I'm from San Francisco. From New Orleans. Okay. I've been here a long time, and I've had this experience sometimes. I get on an elevator or at the university where I used to work, or department stores, whatever, and a Korean gets on the elevator, young guy, young gal, somebody older, whatever, and I look at their face, and I just have a moment of this little frisson, I guess the French say. I kind of recognize them, okay, from somewhere way, way in the past, Sometimes I actually, wow, God damn it, Roy, whatever. Anyhow, this is about that experience, that type of experience. It's called Recognition, Ulsan, South Korea. You know you're at home, finally, in a foreign land, among an alien folk, on the street, in the market, at a bus stop, when, from the face of a stranger, strutting young blade, or dolled-up agashi, besotted office drone, stumbling homeward, crinkled sidewalk auntie, peddling mushrooms and yams, the familiar eyes of an old friend, decades dead, a perished father, a lover long gone over to the other side, stare back. Should I do an encore?
Do an encore. Yeah.
Poem? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I got one more that I brought, just in case I was not on my knees weeping at the end of my performance. Okay. This is a prose poem, and I don't know where the hell it came out of when I wrote it, but I do remember strangely that when I was in elementary school, in my first elementary school, on the wall of the hallway was a mural of the Pied Piper of Hamlet. And I was a kid and I didn't know the story, but I knew the mural, okay? And the mural kind of stayed with me, and then it disappeared, and then sometime back, I don't know, a year or two ago, it seemed to come out in a really twisted form. You know the Pied Piper of Hamelin
Yeah.
story? I think everybody does. Okay, this one is called the Organ Box Junkies. Notice that the organ is spelled O-R-G-U-N. Okay, and if any of you are familiar with Wilhelm Reich, you know Wilhelm Reich, organ box? Luckily, you didn't have to study that weird post-Freudian bullshit. But check it out, he was a weirdo. What I like about him is he got arrested by the United States government for creating a box that he claimed gave you orgasms. At any rate, this is a poem called The Organ Box. Yeah, look it up. Wilhelm Reich, R-E-I-C-H. It's a fascinating story. He was a disciple of Freud, but got himself arrested in America, okay, in the 1950s. Not too different from where we are today back there, or they are today, if you think about it. Not too much freedom. Okay, at any rate, one summer afternoon, my family took delivery of the first organ on our block. It arrived inside an organ box, but the organ was soon removed from the organ box and installed in our parlor. The organ box itself was set out by the curb to be admired by the neighborhood. As each kid climbed in and came out, as each kid climbed in and came out drenched with envy, I discovered that I was loathed as never before. Bicycles pedaled by and slowed down in front of the organ box. Then they leaned forward and sped off. Soon the street and then the whole town was littered with organ boxes on all the curbs. But now the envy and hatred was transfigured into fellow feeling and a sacred kind of love none of us kids had ever known before. Not an organ box was empty of us kids all throughout the day and night, the day and deep into the night, as our parents danced in their parlors to their organs and its tunes. This rapture lasted until the organs in our parlors began to sort of grind inside and fire blanks. First, only one blank in maybe 1,000 notes, and just an occasional grind. Then, no less than one blank in 100, and a likewise grind. My dad took ours apart and oiled it and snapped it back together, but that only made it worse. Soon enough, it was firing one blank in every 10 notes. Then things got really bad, till every other note was a blank, and then nothing but blanks and nothing but grinds. What, Dad said, was the point? Look at all these blank notes lying around, and listen to those grinds. This wasn't part of the deal. That nightfall, we uninstalled the organ from our parlor and wheeled it out to the curb and pushed it inside the organ box. And the rest of the dutiful town followed suit. The next afternoon, the organ boxes were loaded on trucks with hats and flat shoes at the wheel. We were asked to sign pledges that said, no, we had never touched the organs at all. No, they had been delivered by mistake. We were not ready for them yet. No, it had been an experiment. The organs were not good for us after all. No, they were flawed. If the organs were misused, we might hurt ourselves. What about, we cried, the fellow feeling and the sacred kind of love none of us kids had ever known before? The rapture. Did you feel that and know it too? said the hats and flat shoes. Are you sure? Yes, we cried. Yes, we felt it, and we knew it too. Well, said the hats and flat shoes, can you wear a red cap and a bellhop jacket with gold braid? Yes, we cried. Yes, we can. And can you hold a tin cup and dance to a grind? Yes, we cried. Yes, we can. Take us with you. And they did, and we do.